Square Enix, or as I'd like to call them, Squeenix, are widely known for their long list of games. Well, nowadays they're mostly known for the long-running and quote-unquote successful Final Fantasy franchise, but aside from that, there's also Nier, there's Kingdom Hearts, Dragon Quest, and Chrono Trigger. Although they have a few stinkers mixed in there. Marvel's Avengers, Forspoken. And though they have a long list of games spanning decades that are mostly RPGs, what if I told you that there was a time where they dabbled in the shoot 'em up genre, with a game that surprisingly holds its own against other side-scrolling shoot 'em ups at the time, and even against games of today. Though, before we can even get to that, we're gonna need to rewind that clock back to November 20, 1997, a full 9 months after I was born, and 13 years before Justin Bieber would release a smash hit single, Baby. This was essentially the wild wild west of video games, where it was a time when games were yet to establish the norms that we have now, to the good and the detriment of the industry. This was also a time where Square Enix was originally called Square, and this company was already releasing a long list of bangers for the PS1 even in 1997. Games such as Final Fantasy Tactics, Front Mission 2, and Final Fantasy VII, which is the best Final Fantasy, hands down, don't at me. But like my father finally coming home after 20 years later with milk, Square released Einhander, which is a type of sword that's used with one hand. Apparently, if Google is to be believed, full disclosure, I don't speak German. It's a pretty apt title which alludes to the one-handed looking ship you'll be using. Right out of the gate, you are met with this 1997 era FMV. It basically serves as a little bit of an introduction to who you would be playing as and also an introduction to the plot. But to be honest with you, playing this game for the plot is kind of like saying that you watch porn for the plot. Nobody's gonna fucking believe you since gameplay is pretty much the focus of Einhander. It's a side-scrolling shoot 'em up in the same vein as Gradius and R-Type. Before starting the game, however, you're gonna have to deal with the simplicity of the PS1 era menus. The singular hand front and center further pushes the one-hand theme of the titular ship. And to the surprise of my 8-year-old mind in the hot summer days of 2005 Philippines, you can choose 3 versions of the same ship, all with their own unique quirks, with an additional 2 secret ships that you can unlock by doing certain tasks. And this being the PS1 era of gaming, you wouldn't know anything about the secret unless you read it somewhere on a magazine, which I doubt I would read, had a friend tell you about it. I didn't have friends at the time who could even afford to have a PS1, let alone food on the table, or unlocked it out of sheer coincidence, which coincidences like this rarely happened, or looked it up in the early days of dial-up internet, which at the time my broke 8-year-old ass didn't have. The game has 7 stages all connected together with seamless transitions from one stage to the other. It also establishes the setting that you're in. These stages are all bookended by bosses that can range from Zoids to mechanical monstrosities that you can find behind the notebook of a 5th grader. After killing said boss, the game takes a few moments to show you your score and update you on what's happening and what you need to do next via dialogue. Though you'll pretty much just shoot everything to death, so you're probably not gonna listen. And this also acts as a breather for you to get your ass whooped again in the next level. Did I mention that this game is hard? Anyone who's played shoot 'em ups and bullet hells know this pain. But thankfully, while the levels are painful, the sheer joy of shooting things isn't lost. The 3 ships I mentioned earlier have quirks that affect gameplay a little bit, ranging from 3 individual gun pods to store 3 of the guns you picked up, to a 1 gun pod setup where you can manipulate the arm to point your weapon upwards and downwards, sometimes even backwards. Or better yet, equip 1 of each weapon or the same weapons on top and below, giving you the ability to shoot 3 weapons at once for maximum firepower. But don't think enemies are pushovers in this game. Some enemies will go all bullet hell on you and shoot you with a shit ton of projectiles that'll make an A10 Warthog jealous. And sometimes the game decides to swarm you like a bunch of angry bees after you mess with their nest and call their queen fat. And while worrying about the already difficult mobs, get ready to get either atomized, sliced, lasered, exploded, and shot by the bosses who make the fights go from already difficult to straight up recreating Dark Souls in a side-scrolling shoot-em-up. Thankfully, while you're getting your ass beat, you at least get to listen to some tunes. Composed by Kenichiro Fukui, Einhander's OST can range from electronic music to opera. To be honest though, it kinda all fades into the background as I constantly have to focus 100% of my brain on not getting hit. But hey, listening to that game over screen started out as pain, but after a few hours of playing the game, it might actually be the sweet release you need from the grip of this game. All this to say that the game is incredibly fun to play and hard to put down. I gamed a lot on the first PlayStation, and while there were a lot of shoot-em-ups during its time, Einhander easily stands shoulder to shoulder with some of its classic contemporaries. But unfortunately, this is also the last time I've seen Einhander as a standalone game, aside from an unfinished fan-made attempt at making a sequel to it and a reference on Kingdom Hearts Ops 3, Square, now Square Enix, never really attempted to revisit this IP ever again, nor did they really try to make a new side-scrolling shoot-'em-up. I guess they thought it wouldn't be as profitable, the same way Konami told Koji Igarashi that Metroidvania games aren't profitable. Though if you're curious as to how you can play this, unfortunately, I don't know how you can still play this on any modern console, as this was only released for the PlayStation 1 and re-released in PSN but only in Japan. It would seem like emulation is the best way to play this relic from a bygone era, but thankfully, that's pretty easy to do now with the advent of emulation being better than ever. Sadly, as much as I want to talk about the development it took to make this game and the people behind it, the game is so underground I couldn't find much more information about it beyond the usual Wikipedia entries and reviews from decades ago that strictly just talks about the game. But you're probably asking, and by you, I mean me, why'd you make this video then? One, I guess I just miss when developers were ballsy enough to take risks and actually believe in the things that they created. Gone are the days where you'd find an out-of-left-field game made by a AAA developer, since risk mitigation and making the shareholders happy is now the primary goal of the game. Way back then, games felt like it had a soul to it, rather than what we have now. And two, it's pretty easy to be looking at a list of games on your Steam library and not know what to play. And it's also very easy to be caught up in the loop of negativity and the jaded mood modern gaming can put into the masses. So I thought, instead of being a part of that, I'd rather reintroduce classics to the modern player base or even the older player base. So here, play Einhander if you haven't played it, or better yet, play it again if you already have. Thank you very much for watching, and consider joining my Patreon for more behind the scenes content. Until next time.